Hey guys, I'm finally able to bring you my Chaos Dragon deck profile for Edison format. I believe this deck has the ability to go toe to toe against the top 3 decks, because it has the ability to play a long game with Red Eyes Wyvern, but also being able to OTK quickly using some of the boss monsters, as well as Quackimir Drago to play around Gorz, Tragodia, and Fader. Drago also has the unique ability to lock out decks like Blackwing and Vayu for their follow-up turn. And against the Frog deck, you're able to just OTK them, seeing as they usually have an empty board. Or if they do have a board, you can deal with it pretty quickly, because Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon is bigger than all other monarchs. And the deck doesn't really play that many trap cards, so you don't need to worry about your plays being stopped necessarily. Without any further ado, let's just jump right into the deck profile. So to start off with the monsters, I'm playing 3 copies of Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon, 3 copies of Red Eyes Wyvern. This is sort of like the Vayu and Sirocco of the deck. Being able to have these in the graveyard is a way for you to always recur back the red MD in the end phase and be able to get more advantage on the next turn. Now this cuts you off from normal summon or setting, so we can play a lot of cards that require normal summon in this deck. A lot of people play cards like Raikou, but it just has an inherent confliction with this card, seeing as you're not able to use them both in the same turn. And Raikou also has the disadvantage of being bad in late game where your opponent has a lot of monsters, or they have like a Bryanak or other cards that are able to deal with it immediately when you set it. For the other dragon monsters, I'm playing 1 copy of Quackimir Drago, so this is the main reason to play the deck really. I'm only maining 1 just because I'm always able to search it with Future Fusion if I need it. And if I'm not resolving Future Fusion, then I'm just winning the game with other power cards. And you don't need this because your opponent isn't always going to have the Gorz, Trag, or Fader, right? But if you're able to search this out, or you see it over a couple of turns, you're able to always recur it back off of the red MD. That's how you beat their hand traps in the battle phase, as well as their follow-up if they're playing something like Blackwings or Vayu, where they rely on special summoning light or dark monsters. Even something like the fairy deck, this card is very good against, so I have another copy in my side deck in case I need to bring the second one in. For the utility dragons, I'm playing 1 copy of Infernal Dragon. This is a dark monster with 2000 attack. You'll see why that's important later. 1 White Stone of Legend, as well as 1 Blue Eyes White Dragon. So I'm playing the White Stone and Blue Eyes because they're light monsters that you can dump off of Future Fusion, and being able to get a free discard to your hand is also very good. But the main reason why I'm playing them is to have a tuner that I can recur back off of Red Eyes, as well as a 3000 attack beat stick that can attack over any of their problem monsters. Being able to summon a Blue Eyes and a Red Eyes off of just a Wyvern in the end phase on the following turn is very good, because you're able to deal with a lot of the boards that they have. Let's say they have something like just big attack monsters. Maybe something like a Dark Arm isn't a particularly great example because they can just pop the Red Eyes. But if they have cards like Goyo Guardian, they have cards like Armor Master that was summoned by a Vayu effect. They have pretty typical like dupe sublock, being able to just bring back a tuner to go into synchro plays, or a big attack beat stick, so where if you're able to deal with either the dupe frog or substitute, you're able to just attack over all their monsters and hopefully attack for game. While also being able to be a light monster in the graveyard for Chaos Sorcerer, being able to make Future Fusion immediately get a card to your hand, so you're able to refuel the hand advantage. A lot of the times in this deck, you end up not having a dragon in hand for Drago, unless you're playing a lot of them, like the Recruiters. But I think the Dragon Recruiters aren't great because they don't really summon anything good. Something like Shining Angel can summon you either tuner monsters, it can summon you Honest, it gets back to your hand, you can summon DD Warrior Lady, you can summon Lumina. There's just way more light monsters that you can summon off of an Angel, making it way better in the Fairy deck, while also being, of course, Fairies for Christia, that you don't really get in this deck. Sure, you can summon Exploder Dragon, you can summon White Stone, they don't really do what you want them to do. With this deck, you're trying to end the game early by resolving a Future Fusion or just filling up the graveyard with dragons so your Red Eyes becomes a lot stronger. And the recruiters doesn't really play into that game plan. They just end up getting hit by cards like Caius, Icarus Attack, or they just deal with them in other ways than attacking over them. And if you're normal summoning a recruiter and attack into their back row and you get hit by a prison, it doesn't really feel great. So that's why I played just these for the dragon utility. Then of course the Dark Arm Dragon, because I'm playing a bunch of darks and it's a dragon. One Chaos Sorcerer. I'm playing a bunch of darks and light monsters, which you'll see in a second. Not only the Blue Eyes and White Stone, so this card is very good. One Gorse and one Trag. I wanted some more dark monsters that are good every time I draw them. Something that's a normal summon isn't always good, so I'm not playing too many of those because they conflict with the aforementioned combo with Red Eyes in the end phase to bring back your monsters to gain advantage that way. So I want something that I can use when I don't need to normal summon it. So battle hand traps and boss monsters are great. I'm playing one copy of Phantom of Chaos. So originally I was playing more of this, but I cut them down to fit some other cards because there just wasn't space to play all of them. But this card is very, very good. Being able to banish any of your power cards and utilize their effects off of just a normal summon. Something like these cards, anything from the extra deck really, being able to copy like a Bryanak, for example. Now, you don't do any damage with the Phantom of Chaos, but it copies the stats, effects, and its name. So you're still able to run over things by making it a big attack monster. You can copy things like Cyber Dragon post side to make it into a Chimera tech with their machine monster, or just using your own monsters in the graveyard. Also putting them in a banish zone is particularly relevant for something like DDR or Return. But yeah, just giving you more pushes with this deck, being able to manipulate the graveyard a dark amount by banishing one of them. But yeah, I'm only playing one because there just wasn't space to play more in this kind of version of the deck. I could see myself bumping this up in the future, especially if something like Deck Devastation Virus becomes less potent, because this does lose the Deck Devi, which is a downside of this card. For the other monsters, I'm playing one copy of Gale. And of course, I'm playing my new favorite tech card, being Cyber Valley. If you haven't checked out the video that I posted recently on this card, where I go very in-depth why I think this card is very good in certain decks in Edison format, I will leave a link to it in the description box down below, so you can check it out after this video. To touch briefly on why I think this card is good in this deck particularly, is because you're playing something like Gold Sark and Future Fusion, of course, so you're able to buy more turns. It's a light monster for Chaos Sorcerer. It's also just good conversion with your Red Eyes. There's some grind games where you have a Red Eyes on the board. You're able to just Red Eyes, bring back a dragon, normal summon Valley, draw 2, for example, against something like a Duplock, where you bringing back monsters and attacking doesn't really do anything. So just being able to utilize them for a free Pot of Greed is good enough. For the spells, I'm playing some draw cards in Upstart and Other Darkness. There's no Legacy or Reckless in this deck, as they don't synergize well with the game plan and Valley, because I'm trying to see Future Fusion as fast as possible. So I just decided to play these spell cards to draw cards. And I'm playing 2 copies of Gold Sark to be able to search any of your power cards really. You can of course search cards like Future Fusion, Lightning Vortex to be able to deal with some of their cards, as well as Heavy Storm or Brain Control. But you're also able to search any of your bombs. There's a lot of times in this deck where you either already have Future Fusion or you're in a position where Future Fusioning doesn't really do much. Sometimes in the late game we're able to get into scenarios where the Future Fusion may be dead, or it just doesn't do enough because it's being too slow. So you can easily just search any of these if your graveyard is set up for it, or something like a Darkness Metal Dragon if you have a dragon in hand to pair with it, or any of these power spells really. So as I just mentioned, I'm playing 1 copy of Lightning Vortex and 1 copy of Heavy Storm. The Vortex is actually pretty good in this deck because you have a lot of cards that you're fine with discarding. Just being able to Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon back a dragon, discarding it doesn't really matter that much. As well with cards like Blue Eyes White Dragon and White Stone Legend, those are also fine pitches off of the Vortex. Being able to fill up your graveyard for something like a Dark Arm Dragon or Chaos Sorcerer, while also having a good out to either their floodgate monsters like Vanity's Fiend, Fossil Dyna, or just Duplox, or any big Blackwing or Vayu board in general is very good. Heavy is of course very good in this deck. You're trying to deal with your back rows, you can push Fury, Fusion plays. I'm not playing MST though. I don't think MST is very good in this deck because you're not trying to trade 1-for-1 with their back rows. You're just trying to push through what they have, and sure, sometimes you can MST a powerful trap like Torrential Mirror Force and that wins you the game where you would have lost otherwise. But there's also a lot of scenarios where you try MST and it just doesn't do enough because you have to deal with their monsters, not their back row. Usually the back row is pretty easy to grind through. There's not a lot of things that they can do that trades super well into your back row. Usually you can bait a lot of them out by just playing your deck normally and using your boss monsters to push through what they have. And of course, MSTing cards like Draw Traps is very weak. One reason why I maybe would main it is to beat Black Whirlwind. I think that's the main reason why a lot of people should main MST. But if my deck plays as it's supposed to play, we're not going to get into a long game. And their Black Whirlwind, sure, them being able to search more monsters is good, but if we're going to turn 6-7 against Blackwing, I expect to already have lost at that point. So being able to space their Whirlwind and then grind them out from there isn't really a possibility. Then I'm playing Brain Control and Mind Control. These cards are very good at Valley and the tuners in this deck. 1 DDR. So this is something you mainly see in the Amaryllis deck because they can search it off of Hidden Armory. There is actually a reason to play Hidden Armory in this deck because it doesn't conflict with Red Eyes Wyvern. But the issue with that is that usually you want to hit an armory on the turn that you push, and then you have to wait until the end phase to bring back Red Eye, so it just ends up being too slow. But I really liked having the 1 TDR in this deck and potentially even more copies, just because it's a premature burial that's from the banish zone by also discarding a card, so it's obviously worse, but it's legal to play in the format, so I'm playing it. You could argue playing more of them. The issue is it's not very good early game because your banish zone needs to be fueled up, which usually isn't a problem. You usually end up summoning something like a Red Eyes and it gets bottomless, then this card is live, or you're able to use something like Cyber Valley to either banish the Red Eyes or banish itself, and you're able to recur it back. So getting this live isn't really a problem, but you don't want to clog on too many cards like DDR, cards like Return. Too many of these cards end up losing you the game. Also, it's bad into oppression, so there's some downsides to it, of course. But I really liked having the 1 copy, and it's very good when you draw it. Then the last spell card is 1-for-1 to be able to summon Whitestone or Cyber Valley. For the trap cards, I'm playing 2 copies of Deck Devastation Virus. So this card is obviously very good in the format. There's a lot more Dream Frogs now than a couple of weeks ago, so I really want to have something in the main deck to beat that. Your Blackwing and Vayu matchup is actually pretty good because you're able to put them on a clock quickly, and with Draco you can play around their follow-up. But for the Frog matchup, outside of Draco stopping their battle hand traps, you don't have a lot of clean outs to their Frog cards. For example, if they do a Duplock or Sublock, you want something in the main deck to be able to just clean them out, and this card's obviously very good at doing that. In this deck particularly, it's very easy to activate, and you have a lot of nice synergies with the deck Devi. So what you're able to do is you can go Future Fusion to dump your 5 dragons into the graveyard by revealing 5-headed dragon. In the end phase, you can banish the Wyvern to bring back the Red Eyes. Play your deck Devi that was set the turn previously. Repeat this off. Use your second Wyvern to bring this back because it's not once per turn. You also have a lot of other dark monsters in your deck that you can utilize for deck devastation virus. Something like Infernal Dragon, as we mentioned previously, being a 2000 attack dark monster. Something like Dark Arm Dragon, of course, Chaos Sorcerer. But also the battle hand traps like Dragon Gorse being good targets for deck Devi, as well as Phantom of Chaos. So if you use Phantom of Chaos to banish a Red Eyes, to summon back a dragon. You can then use deck Devi to tribute this off before the end phase, and they're under deck Devi. So getting deck devastation live is very easy in this deck. A lot of your cards just naturally make it live. 2 bottomless, because I wanted something against Blackwing and Vayu where I can stunt their place. A lot of the time when you activate Future Fusion or Gold Sark for Future Fusion, or any bomb in your deck really, they understand that they need to put you on a clock and they need to kill you as fast as possible. So being able to have some trap cards to protect your life is very good. Torrential Mirror Force, Dust Shoot, and 1 return. In this deck, return is obviously one of the best cards. Being able to just bring back your valleys and any dragons, just pushing for game is super good. It's even better in this deck than the fairy deck. And for the extra deck, I'm playing 1 Armory Arm, mainly because if you take a low level monster with mind control or brain control, you can synchro it off. But also being able to put a light and dark engrave if you have Valley and Gale, you can just make this, and that puts a light and dark engrave for Chaos Sorcerer, Cataster, Bryo, Goyo, Armor Master for the Gale, Black Rose, Thought Ruler Archfiend, Colossal Fighter, Red Dragon Archfiend. This card is for frogs. If they put up something like Substitute in defense, as well as a Dupe Frog, a lot of the time when you play against the Dream Frog deck, they usually try to keep the Substitute on the field because they think that you can't really do much against it. So let's say they go normal summon it and they tribute their 3/1 frogs and get up a Dupe Frog and they pass. Well, you pass back. Then naturally they're gonna put the sub in defense because they think that, oh, okay, if you can deal with Dupe Frog, I don't want to keep a 100 attack position monster in attack. But they might not be inclined to do the full Dupe block just because they understand that maybe it's more valuable to put something like a Unifrog or a Flip-Flop Frog on the field. If you can make a Red Dragon Archfiend in that scenario, you can just attack into the Dupe Frog. Sure, it doesn't die, but his effect triggers and blows up all their defense position monsters, so you're able to clear the sub-block in that way. Pretty niche scenario, but it's worth the 1 extra X slot. 1 Stardust, 1 Mistworm, 1 Chimera Tech, and 1 5-headed dragon. For the side deck, I'm playing 2 copies of DD Crow, 1 copy of Quagmire Drago. This usually comes in against something like Fairies, or if you're playing something like the Vayu Turbo deck, where they play much less trap cards and just focus more on the engine. I don't love this card against Blackwings or the normal Vayu deck because it just ends up getting hit by something like Raikou or Sirocco or any trap card. So just the 1 in the main deck is enough. But against the decks where this really shuts them out, I think it's really good. Since I'm also bringing 3 copies of Sirocco against Vayu and Blackwing, I don't want to have too many normal summons. Then I'm playing 2 copies of Cyber Dragon. Machina is kind of a difficult matchup because your Drago doesn't really do anything, and dealing with a Fortress can be quite annoying if you just have the Red Eyes and your other dragons because you don't really have a clean way to out it. But being able to have Sidrus that you can return back or DDR back with a light monster for Sorcerer, so getting it out of the graveyard is possible. Or with something like Phantom of Chaos, you can copy its name. This could warrant playing 2 copies of Chimera Tech in the extra deck, so that's a consideration if you feel you have the space. I'm playing 1 copy of MST. I want this game 2 and game 3 against Blackwing and Vayu because I want to deal with their oppression that they bring in post-side. A lot of people aren't maining them, so there's no reason to main the space to beat that card. 1 Deep Prison. I want another card in my side deck that can deal with something like Christia or Vanity's Fiend. 1 Karma Cut. I think this is the best one-off trap if you want something that can deal with Vanity's Fiend and the frogs against the frog deck. Being able to take either Treeborn or Dupe Frogs away. I'm playing 1 Eradicator and 1 Trap Stun. So Eradicator is very good in this deck because a lot of your dragons are over 2500 attack. And if you use any of your Sirocco effects, boosting it up, the lowest it can be is 28 with their Vayu. So always making the Eradicator live is very good. Because against that deck, you just Eradicator their trap cards and they're not left with anything really. A lot of people are playing the draw traps, so their trap count is usually 15 or 16. So you have a good chance of hitting enough cards with the Eradicator to make it good enough. And the trap stun is just something that you can chain to what they have. And if you're playing against something like Blackwing and they have an oppression face up, you can just trap stun it, make your plays, deal with their monsters, and then they're locked under their own oppression. And a lot of the ways that the Blackwing deck deals with your field is by special summoning a bunch of birds and making synchro plays or boosting up a big Sirocco. Well, they can't do that if they have oppression face up, because you can just negate their special summons. And then 2 copies of Pulling the Rug. I hope you guys enjoyed my deck profile for Chaos Dragons. If there's any other decks, particularly with Cyber Valley, you would like to see me innovate on, please let me know in the comments. There's still plenty of innovation left in Edison format, so stay tuned for that.